So fresh back in after a bank holiday weekend.
Not sure about fresh, but back in.
Back in. We've only got 4 days to get through, and then you got another weekend.
Exactly.
And this is the 2 bank holidays in a month. Oh, yeah, it was good.
It's always good.
You have a good weekend?
Yep. Went around some lovely gardens. Getting old.
I'm just about to make a joke about your age, and I realised I'm on thin ice.
Very nice. Well, yeah, we tried to get our kids to come with us, but apparently that's the sort of thing that boomers do. So
They're calling you a boomer.
they're calling me a boomer. They know that it.
But apologies to all those boomers listening.
Yeah, nothing against the boomers, but yeah, they know that will push my button a little bit.
Yeah.
So
Well, you're a solid Gen X, aren't you? Well, you're in the back. You're on the cusp.
I claim I'm Gen X.
You're almost a millennial.
Almost a millennial.
Right.
Depending on which.
But you can look down on millennials from a lofty Gen X position.
I feel more aligned to Gen X characteristics, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Been around old people too much. Old before your time. I'm more solidly Gen X, but just at the other end of the Gen X spectrum. But still exhibit all of those Gen X characteristics.
Exactly.
Don't understand youngsters today.
Oh, there we go. Maybe that's another podcast to do a generational theory.
I'm sure we've touched upon it before, but we've never done an episode on it, have we?
Yeah.
That's
It's quite an interesting topic.
It is. It's hugely interesting. Yeah. Okay. Well, we'll come back to that then. See if it crops up today. It may well do. Okay. Should we start a podcast?
Go on then.
Okay. Hello and welcome to another episode of the SME Growth Podcast from Wellmeadow, where every week we try and come up with some useful and interesting things to talk to you about when you're growing your small and medium-sized enterprise. This is episode 69, believe it or not. So we've been doing this for 18 months now, I think we've been doing it, 69. Yep. I thought we'd just, and I don't know if we'll stick at doing this, but just reflecting on what the last 3 were, because if people have come into this podcast and haven't heard the previous ones. So last week's was quite interesting, got quite a bit of traction. It's the first one, episode 68, first time in 68 episodes we'd ever talked about our work on board meetings.
I know.
Bizarre, wasn't it?
It's
almost like, what do we do again? 3,000 board meetings under our belt, sharing board meetings between us. And we thought we'd better talk about it. So we did. So that got a good bit of feedback. The one before that, episode 67, was when Andy Jowett was our guest. Oops, sorry, I'm just smashing the studio up. Andy Jowett was our guest, and he talked about succession planning in his non-profit. Ooh, that was really interesting episode, especially his little anecdote about Brian Adams.
Brian Adams. You're going to set me off. I'm going to start.
You start singing.
Start singing Brian Adams songs.
Okay. Well, I'll move on quickly then, and just remind people that episode 66, which is still in the news, but is Google buying HubSpot? Have they got a spare $33 billion in the bank?
Stuff down the couch.
Yeah.
Back of the couch.
They've got the money, so I think it's worth it. So we're all waiting to see, as HubSpot users, what that might or might not mean for us, if they do. Good, bad, don't know. So listen to our thoughts on that back in episode 66. But here we are in episode 69.
The summer of 69.
Yeah.
Let's see what I did with my Brian Adams.
See what you did with your Brian Adams link there. Let's start singing. Please just start singing.
So that could be the title of this podcast.
Okay. That won't be at all opaque. People know exactly. So what regular listeners will know is that we do talk about AI a bit. And I suppose today's subject is quite closely linked to that. But we probably need to give a bit of backstory, don't we?
Yeah.
Because it's really about, I'm going to call it pay-per-click advertising, but it isn't anymore pay-per-click advertising. That's the point of today's episode. So if you've come across Google Ads before, and you probably, like us, think, what a quick way to lose a lot of money and moved away from it. I think what we're talking about today is maybe a call to go and have another look.
And I suppose people might be thinking, but wait, you talk about inbound marketing at HubSpot.
We do.
Why all of a sudden the PPC approach? And I think this is something that we've been, evolving in our own thinking a little bit.
I think even the proponents of inbound marketing, led by HubSpot, are also thinking a bit about it. And I remember talking about it when we discussed the whole ChatGPT thing a few episodes back, that if people start using ChatGPT for their information gathering rather than a search engine, then what's the point of having websites rich with information? Because you're not going to serve up a website with its answers. You're going to consolidate it with another 1,000 websites and produce the answer anonymously. So the motivation to produce decent SEO-friendly content will be a lot lower. And furthermore, Google seems to have completely changed their tack in terms of their principles of what front page search looks like.
Yeah.
For a start, there's no such thing as front page anymore. Infinitely scrolling, isn't it?
Yeah.
So you just keep going and going and going. But the first equivalent of a front page is mostly sponsored stuff now.
Yeah.
So
So
people also ask and that sort of thing. So even if you had pretty good SEO content, you're already below the fold. So where's all that going? So I guess that's what's got us to looking at some of these other, like you suggested.
and I think it's not so much abandoning inbound. I think there is still a lot of value in producing content that adds value to your customers, which is almost a given, really. But it's about, I suppose, what's the term now? All bound, isn't it, or something that's banded around? But it's about really looking at horses for courses, isn't it? And there's lots of
you need the mix. You still got to have good content that when people do get to your website and have a look around, they see you as authoritative and trustworthy and solving for the customer and all that sort of thing. So yeah, you'd still need that element of what we used to call inbound content, but you can't rely upon it as being such a powerful magnet, which it used to be when SEO could get you to where you want to be.
And I think there's probably changes in consumer behavior as well, isn't there? I think a lot of the inbound kind of textbook, for want of a better word, examples were they kind of date a little bit, maybe 10, 15 years ago.
Yeah, sure. The classic swimming pool
example, and all of that. So things are changing, the landscape's changing, so you've got to evolve and adapt, haven't you?
Yeah, for sure. And I suppose people are also finding out a lot more about your company without necessarily even coming to your website. So much now is more rich form on socials rather than just using it as a signpost to your website. The content is now on the socials. Yeah. You got to look a lot clever at that. So why did we end up where we are? Well, we were looking at various different sources of leads and so on for our clients and for ourselves. And we were talking, generally speaking, about PPC, as we'll loosely call it, Google Ads and the Microsoft equivalent on Bing. And as I said in the intro there, I think we've got quite a jaundiced view about it, haven't we? We've played with it before, on and off. In fact, when we went back into our account, I think it had been there for nearly 20 years. So we've been giving money to Google on and off in sort of fits and spurts for a long time, but never really got it to do what we wanted, did we really?
Well, we've never really, I suppose, had to, have we? We've never really had to give it attention.
No.
And I suppose this time round, with the AI stuff and the way that we're looking at things, particularly around HubSpot, then it's probably getting a little bit more of our attention than maybe previously it warranted.
Yeah. And to be honest about it, we set up a campaign about a month ago using Google Ads. And there's this new thing to us, which isn't new because it's been around since June 21. And some of you may have heard of it. And the message from today is if you haven't heard about this thing called Performance Max in Google Ads, then we're going to try and tell you a bit about it today, but go and find out about it because that's potentially, and this is hanging in the air, but potentially the game changer to what might suddenly bring AdWords back to the higher up the list anyway of your considerations.
Yeah.
And it's not just pay-per-click, which is where we can all spend a lot of money not getting what we want.
Yeah. And so I think there's probably a few things to talk about just around, I don't know, do we talk about what is Performance Max? How do we...
Yeah, quick intro. Yeah, how would you summarize it?
I suppose we're not, we should caveat this by saying we're not AdWords experts here, are we?
Never have been.
We
never will be. But we're enthusiastic users. And I guess what we're trying to do is to almost spend some time learning a bit more about this to share with our audience so that they've got a bit of a head start. So for a first thing is if you've not heard the term Performance Max and you're running a company or you're senior manager in a company, go and ask your marketing people, what do they think of it?
Yeah.
And if they get the sort of reaction that we did get from someone early on who's involved in this area is, it's a bit too complicated, I wouldn't trust it if I were you, then go and get another opinion because there's a lot of depth to this. And actually what Google are trying to do is very, very clever. But you've got to get it set up right. You've got to understand what it's trying to do. And you've got to put up with that early phase where it's learning because this is about AI and learning.
Yeah.
So we're not experts. But already, I think we are in a position to say to people, it's worth going and having another look. What do you say?
So I suppose one of the first things we did, because we were just in that, I suppose this is where you probably need to approach this with a little bit of thinking and a little bit of preparation, because our first attempt was to just grab some assets. So effectively what you do is you don't put in your keywords anymore, do you? You don't do that whole kind of...
The whole thing's so different. It's weird. In fact, you get quite lost when you go into Google Ads and you try and set up a Performance Max campaign because all those things you're familiar with have gone.
Yeah. So you effectively create some assets, which could be bits of text or an image or a video or something, and you upload those, and then you give it a few parameters around what you want it to kind of, this is the sort of thing we're interested in, CRM or HubSpot or onboarding or that type of thing. And then it sort of does its thing, doesn't it?
It does its thing.
And it works out the various combinations and the various kind of searches, and because it knows who's looking at ads and what they're clicking through and all of that type of thing, it's trying to optimize for you your conversions, isn't it?
Well, I think if I were to summarize what's different about it, why are we even talking about it today and why are we using it? There seem to be two key elements to this. And one of them may have been there all along, I'm not sure, where Google knows an awful lot about the people typing in search terms into Google. Now, they always have. But if you are bidding on keywords, I'm not sure how they used to link that together. Whereas now they explicitly do. So if they know that you're a 20-something male that's into cricket, they'll serve you up different sorts of ads than if you're a middle-aged woman into crochet. And maybe they've always done that. But as an advertiser, you've got a bit more, I don't know, you don't really see it. It's still a bit opaque, but you just know that they're doing that a bit more. But the second point is the one that you just alluded to, and this is where I think is the potential game changer, is that it's absolutely nailed on improving conversions.
Yeah.
This isn't about cost per click anymore.
Yeah.
This is cost per conversion, to the point where even you can, once you've got enough volume on it, and you can't do this straight away, but you can even pay just for the conversions. Yeah. Now, you couldn't do that before in pay per click. It would give you the cost per conversion stat, but it wouldn't allow you to only pay when there was a conversion. You're still paying for the clicks. Whereas now when you've got enough conversions, you can say to Google, I only want to pay for people who ring me on the phone or fill the form in or make an online purchase.
And you define what that conversion is, don't you? So that's not a Google thing. That's you setting that up to say, if they filled this form in or called this number, like you say.
And I think that's very clever from Google, because they always knew with cost per click that we all had this fairly lowish percentage conversion from clicks to something useful to you. So whether that be 1 in 100 or 5 in 100, doesn't matter. It's a lowish number. So when you're trying to work out, do I mind paying £2 a click or £5 a click? It's all very hard to compute. Whereas cost per conversion, most business people can get their head around that. So if someone rings my business or fills a form in or makes an online transaction, I've got a figure in mind for what I'm prepared to pay for that.
I think it de-risks it a bit as well, doesn't it? I mean, it certainly made us think about it in a different light. Yeah. So, well, actually, right. So you're saying we only have to pay if someone fills that form in. Now, some of that then is up to us, isn't it? In terms of what does a landing page look like? What does a form look like? And all of those sorts of things. That's in your control. But you're not just paying for 1,000 people to come on your landing page. Who are they? What is it?
Could be a load of rubbish. And it will be a load of rubbish.
Yeah.
So I'll throw the two stats out of where we are with our campaign at the moment. We're currently paying 70p a click. Now, in the past, we've had campaigns that run around that, maybe a bit more, maybe a bit less. But still, when I'm asked, is that a good number? Are you prepared to pay more? Or, is that too much?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Really. Yeah.
It depends who the clicks are. It's 70p a click.
Yeah.
I'm just buying eyeballs to come and have a quick look at my website and disappear again. But the equivalent for us at the moment is £38 per conversion. Now, if you ask me, what would you be prepared to pay per conversion? If they were solid conversions, so they weren't just spammy form fills, then £38 isn't bad. I'd probably spend quite a bit more than that if I knew that 1 in 2 or 3 of them would turn into a client. That'd be quite good, wouldn't it? But you've been seeing some of the conversions coming through, and they're not all necessarily high quality yet.
No, and I think this is where one of the things, whilst it's impressive what Google's doing by, you upload your assets. So again, you're in control of that. So if you put poor quality assets up, you're probably not going to get the results that you might see. And again, you want to be probably testing those sorts of things. But we're in control of the landing page, so we can optimize that as well. But what we are seeing is, like I say, a bit of spammy stuff coming through at the start. Now, maybe that's just the start of the campaign. That's what you've got to deal with. You get a kind of flush through. But what we don't want to do is train the AI model that Google's got on saying that spammy conversions are what we want. Yeah, so you do have to. So you really have to keep your eye on this at the start, and probably the whole way through, really. But we're at the start of this to really say this is a good conversion or a bad conversion. So we've got a little bit of optimizing to do.
So just to go back and explain then what's different about this, it's now explicitly tying in Google's knowledge about who the searcher is, and right down to individual level, not sort of generalized demographics about the 20-something cricket supporter, but whether that person is likely to follow a link for certain things and fill in a form, and whether they convert or not, and what type of things they're buying, and are they in a position in business where they have spending authority or not. It knows that.
Yeah.
But the other key thing is this AI learning business, where because you're not any longer listing keywords, which was the bit that really disorientated me when I first went, you don't list the keywords you want to bid on anymore. Google takes complete control of that with its AI. You just put these assets up. You talk about, generally speaking, what type of thing you're doing, but it learns the rest from your URL, the landing page that you're sending it to. And then it just plays. And it throws mud at the wall and sees what sticks. And that's the bit you're saying at the beginning. You're going to get a bit of rubbish, because all it's trying to do is to work out in lots of different combinations of those assets you've put there, headlines, bits of text, images, videos, which ones seem to work.
And I suppose here's a good practical tip for people if they're playing with this. When we first started our campaign, we were noticing that despite it having a dedicated landing page for HubSpot onboarding that we want to send people to, some of the ads that we were seeing and the clicks we were getting were going to completely random pages on our website. So we were paying money to go to like some blog somewhere that was talking about recruitment or something, just some really random stuff. But there is a box you can just untick to stop that happening, isn't there?
Yeah. And it's, we're not trying to say you need to use people like us. In fact, we'd almost say the opposite. You don't need to use outsiders at all. I think it needs such dedicated focus on it. You need to take more of an interest.
Yeah.
We can hold your hand through it and maybe point you in the right direction, but we are not holding ourselves out here as being the agency that will look after that. But you're right, there's a box. And if you don't untick that box, Google's efforts to get you conversions will go so far, they will start throwing traffic at completely random other parts of your website, at least during the testing phase, to see if they also convert. And you don't really want to do that, do you? Unless
no, I mean, it depends. I suppose it depends on your website, doesn't it? If you've only got 3 pages on it and each one's got a form and you want to see what's got it, you might think, okay, just let's see what people are interested in.
Even if it's got lots of pages, but they're all similar-ish.
But for us, we were saying we want to really use this for a very specific campaign. And so we want to make sure that we're sending the traffic to that particular page. So unticking that box was a bit of a revelation.
And just a reminder for everyone, if you haven't got landing pages set up for these things, a landing page is a page without navigation. So once you've got people there, you don't want them wandering around the rest of your site. And it's got some sort of capture form on it.
Yeah.
Not just a CTA ideally, but actually the form where people then commit to doing something. Yeah. And what we found in our early experiments is if you put that form too high up the page, then you get a lot higher fall off, because people think, they just want to grab my email address, and they then give up. Whereas if you put lots of valuable content there first so that people see the value in what they might get if they contact you, and put the form at the bottom, we're getting a much higher conversion rate.
Yeah, so actually staying on top of what does that landing page look like, landing page design. So I'm going through it at the moment and trying to, and I think this is another thing that I'd recommend people do, is really document what it is you're doing. So if you're changing your landing page, again, try and control your variables a little bit on it. Only change one thing at a time if you can. But I'd say some of that is, you could probably be a bit more daring with that depending on the volume of traffic, because it's not as if we're getting so much traffic that it's statistically significant in terms of what we're doing. But we had a page up for a couple of weeks that wasn't really doing anything. The form was too high up the page, it would seem. And so we've moved that around and currently running an A/B test. So at the top of the page, we've got a video, and for one of the, I think that's the B version, and the A version doesn't. Kept that the same, just removed the form. So, and then we've changed the look and feel of the page a little bit as well. So but I'm trying to document all of that. I'm using something called, screen capture. So Google Chrome extension, just so I've got keeping a visual log of what the page looks like. Yeah. We're also still recording what's happening on pages as well, so we can view visitor interactions. Well, that's true. Mention a shout out for Microsoft Clarity. Yeah. If anybody's not seen that, it tracks the mouse moves as well as clicks and the scrolls on a page. So, and that was the thing that was leading us to really understand that people were coming to the page, but then seeing a form straight away, this is a bit too much.
That's quite spooky though, when you see you've just paid your 70p a click or whatever it is, someone's landed on your page and you watch them recorded of how they're interacting with your page. And it's so disappointing. You're willing that mouse to move over the button that you know submits a form or something, and it just wanders somewhere else, and you can tell it's gone up to the back arrow.
Yeah.
and that's quite sobering. You've got to learn about that. But it does do this learning bit as well as we've got to do learning on the landing page. That's in our control. If you get clicks but not conversions, that's your fault.
Yeah.
You're getting traffic, but you're not doing something with it. But on the Google end, where they're doing the AI bit, they're just going to throw all these different combinations at it, trying to maximize the conversion. So you've got to get that signal working early on.
Yeah.
And then you've got to put up with the fact that there's got to be a learning phase. And I remember a few episodes ago in our podcast, I think it was episode 64, we talked about telemarketing. And when we were talking to the guy there about that, he said, you've really got to put in 3 to 6 months worth of his minimum tariff was $2,250 a month or something. So you're talking 6 to 10 grand plus of investment just to see if it works or not for you. That's telemarketing. Now, it's not as expensive, but you've got to think in similar terms, I think, if you're going to go down this road. There's no point putting a £5 a day budget on it and hoping to have an answer within 2 weeks.
Yeah.
You've not given Google a chance to learn. It needs volume of data.
Yeah.
So I've certainly seen some examples where you've got to pay £50 a day for a month. Okay, 1,500 quid. It's not quite the 10,000 we just talked about, but it's probably more than people would have previously been prepared to invest, spend, waste, whatever, on trying something that might not work.
But I think with this, because you can see what's happening as well, like if you're on it every single day, £50 a day doesn't actually, for the learning, isn't it? If you don't think of it as £50 on ads, think about, well, I'm going to spend £50 a day to learn something new about, you know, and if that means, right, we're going to change where we put the form, we're going to change the color of a CTA, we're going to just tweak the messaging a little bit. And every day, by the end of that month, you should really be in a position where you're either seeing the results come through or just like, there's no market for this.
Well, there's two things going on at once there, isn't there? Because like you say, you're learning internally with the things you've got control over.
Yeah.
You can change some settings on the Google campaign itself, but you don't want to change too much too quickly on that. But you can change a lot more on the landing page and the conversion attempts. But at the same time, Google is doing its learning. It's finding different people to throw at your page based on who it's serving up. And the other important point to note is that it's doing that across a much broader real estate than the old PPC used to.
Yeah.
It's doing it across YouTube, across all their partner network, across Google Discovery, Google Search itself, Gmail itself. So there's a lot you can do there. And as you build remarketing lists and you've got customer lists, you can then start using those in other forums as well across other platforms. So it's finding across a very broad range of audience who it is that might actually fill your form in and convert. So you've got to make sure your conversions are valid signals for you, but you've got to give it time.
Yeah.
And I think if you're not prepared to spend that $50 to $100 a day maybe for a month or so, and then learn and tweak and improve, then it's probably not worth starting. You've got to give it that sort of.
I think you really
chance.
do have to sit on it. Otherwise, you're going to train Google to give you stuff that you don't want. So, for example, over the weekend, we've had an awful lot of conversions come through, which are Gmail addresses, which look quite spammy. Yeah. So one of the things that we can do with a HubSpot form is exclude submissions on that form, and the form submission is the kind of conversion that we're looking for to tell Google that's what we want.
Yeah.
So we want to make sure that the people that are filling that form in are genuine and at least have a need that they want to discuss. So having gone back to a few of the Gmail people, the results is nothing back at all. Yeah. I think it's people looking for jobs or spam or I don't know what it is. But so what we'll do with the HubSpot form, today's experiment or today's action from it, from the learning, is to exclude Gmail addresses from being submitted on the form, which you can do in HubSpot.
Yeah, it's quite interesting. I know a lot of people listening will be using WordPress sites with plugins, and even if they're HubSpot users, they'll probably have the WordPress HubSpot plugin activated to do the tracking and things. Just check that your form can prevent submissions in the first place from free email accounts, which fortunately HubSpot's forms allow you to do out of the box. If you're integrating one, that may well work even on a WordPress site. But you don't want that submit button to light up and be clickable until a valid email address is put in. And there is a check for, is it a free email, as one of the HubSpot form settings. So you don't have to manually check for hundreds of Gmail, Hotmail, iCloud, all that stuff,
AOL.
AOL, there's about a list of 100 or so that it will strip out. So you don't want it to trigger that submit action and go to a thank you page unless you've got a legitimate email address.
And it may well be that you do lose something from that. I mean, there will be people with Gmail addresses. We had someone the other day download board meeting guide, Gmail address that was a genuine inquiry. But that, I think...
Well, we get it with our Roger Martin Fag newsletters. And with apologies to Matt and Jim out there who tell me every quarter when that comes out, I can't download it because I've got a Gmail address. And that's true. We do know people who use their non-work email address to find out about this sort of stuff.
Yeah.
But nevertheless, at the small risk of the false negatives, it'll take out all those ones that we've just talked about.
Yeah.
You really don't want that sort of traffic at all. Certainly not. I mean, you wouldn't mind it if you just cost per click stuff, you're just paying for the traffic. But if that's what Google is learning on, and it's going to send you more of that because it thinks you want it, then you've got to chop that off quickly.
Yeah.
So there are a few criticisms of it. And I must admit, we've found people who know their stuff around this area, and even people who are familiar with the whole Google Ads space aren't all universally accepting of it, mainly because it's a new thing, and I think you've got to get your head around it. But the main criticism of it is the lack of transparency. You can't really tell what's going on. So you used to be able to look at which of your keywords were doing well. You could look at which search terms were being used, and then you could put in negative keywords and refine your campaign like that. Well, you haven't got any of that anymore. It's all happening under the hood. Google are doing it behind the scenes. All you know is that based on what you've told it and what assets you've given it, it's sending you some traffic, which it thinks is converting.
Yeah. Which I suppose, I don't know, how much do you really...
You got to trust it.
Yeah. I mean, again...
Well, at least for the trial. I'm not saying trust it forever. I'm not a Google shareholder or something, but if you do your trial for a month and you can't get it to work and you've given it a fair shot, then don't trust it anymore. It's not working for you. But that may not be the system's fault. It seems to be working for other people, and we've seen webinars and videos where people are showcasing how they've got it to work for them. So I'm prepared to take it on its word that for the right product market fit, it is a good solution. But you can't just throw a quick campaign up, chuck a couple of keywords in, and expect to get rich within a week. It's going to take a bit of effort.
And I think you've got to make sure you've got the right assets that are going up so that your images look good, your videos are the right, kind of 15-second clip.
Yeah.
If you're putting up poor quality advertising assets, then you might not get the results that you could.
Which is true in anything.
Which is true.
Back in print media, if you just put a really badly designed advert in a print publication, it would look crummy, wouldn't it? And I think that's probably something that we've noticed the big difference. You can't just rely on text. Low budget PPC in the past, you could come up with a headline, 2 lines of text of 60 characters, and a landing page, and that was all you had to do. So you didn't have to be particularly creative. Whereas now it won't let you submit the campaign unless you've got at least 2 images, I think, with different sizes.
Yeah.
And if it wants video, so if you haven't uploaded a video, it will create video from the images you've given it and the text, and do a bit of Ken Burns and all that, which is okay, but it's not great, is it? It looks like you haven't bothered. So I think, imagine a video being that annoying little video you see at the beginning of YouTube clips where, video will play in 4 seconds, or you've got to watch the whole 10 seconds. You've got to do something that in 10 seconds has an impact, not just throw up a video you happen to have of, a drone flying over your factory or whatever you've got.
Yeah, so I think there is that bit of, whilst Google's doing the quote unquote thinking with its AI, you've got to put in the hard yards beforehand to really think through, okay, what is the messages we want Google to, because it's only going to serve up and work with what you give it.
Yeah.
So you've got to make sure that.
And it's going to favor anybody else advertising that's more likely to get a conversion from that particular person searching that particular thing at that particular time. And it is quite clever how they do it all. It's all sort of in real time as you're typing your search query and all that sort of thing. It's all very clever. But they are interested now, and I think this is where we've got the alignment of goals. The Google machine is interested in what you're interested in, which is that whole perfect situation of paying for conversions, as long as you've got your conversions right.
Yeah.
So, okay, if that works, I'm prepared to pay for it. In the same way that I'd pay a telemarketing agency to give me that appointment when I know that 1 in 2 of them will convert to a customer.
Yeah.
I'm prepared to pay quite a lot for that appointment. Whereas in the past, you were just paying for traffic and a quick way of spending a lot of money.
Yeah.
So, one of the concerns is certainly that you've got this lack of transparency and to a certain degree, lack of control over that as well. It's all a little bit opaque. There are some concerns about the brand alignment and where your ads get shown.
Yeah.
But there are some changes recently. Google have put that in to try and exclude certain types of and specific URLs if you don't want your advert shown on certain things. It is a bit more complicated. You've got to have better assets, which is what you've talked about just there. You can't just throw up the text-only stuff. So you've got to make sure you've got someone to prepare some nice still images and video images.
Yeah.
Paradoxically, slightly less of a concern on the exact text you use because you throw up 10 different examples of a headline and 10 different examples of a benefit statement and 10 different examples of site links. And it just jumbles them all around randomly while it's learning.
Works out. Yeah.
And it works out what works for you.
Yeah.
And it is obviously Google only. So I looked up where Microsoft are with this, and they've got their PMax equivalent, Performance Max equivalent, and it's coming out soon, Q2 2024, they say. So we're right in the slap bang in the middle of Q2 now, so we'll see how that goes. Be interesting to see how much that mimics the same sort of behavior. I'm not sure whether, I don't know, I don't think, does Microsoft know as much about me as Google does? Google knows an awful lot about me. I use Gmail for my private stuff. I use Chrome for my search, and I'm logged in when I use it. Yeah. It pretty much knows as much as it's going to be. But I don't use Edge. Has it learned? If it's learned anything from my email, it'll be my work behavior. Yeah. If it's got access to that, I'm not sure how it uses that. So I'm not sure how Bing would do that. But we've always said before, Bing advertising is interesting because so many laptops come pre-installed with Edge. Yeah. And either corporate policy or user preference doesn't switch away from it. Yeah. Exactly. So Bing has maybe a smaller percentage, but maybe quite a useful, rich one. And I think last month, Lewis was telling us, wasn't he, that the percentage share of search that Google has dropped significantly for the first time in forever, dropped 4 points, partly because there's so many promoted listings coming up on what used to be called page one. So yeah, interesting stuff coming out with maybe Microsoft as well, and we can share something of that as we develop it.
But we can continue to share our successes and failures with Performance Max
of others to learn the same. But the key message from today is don't dismiss Google Ads like you used to, or if you have already, maybe think it's worth another look. Test to see if your marketing people are across this. Are they already having a play with Performance Max? Have they had a look at it? Have they turned off it for some of those concerns that it's complex and opaque? And if so, maybe push through and say, okay, yes, but give it a go anyway. And this whole idea of paying for conversions, you've got to get 100 conversions first before it lets you switch over to a pay-per-conversions model. So up until then, you're still pay-per-click. Yeah. So you've got to get enough conversions through, make sure they're the right ones that you want while it's learning. And then you can switch over to paying just for people that you actually want to fill your form in or make a phone call to you or whatever you define that conversion to be.
Sounds very interesting.
It does, doesn't it? So we'll see how it goes. Stay tuned. Well, thanks a lot for listening to another episode of the SME Growth Podcast by Wellmeadow. As we said at the beginning, every week we try and come up with something interesting and useful, and hopefully today's no exception. We've come up with something that you might be able to reflect on and discuss with the rest of your team. Please tell your friends in business about us. Send them an email, tell them in the pub, or just send a link to the Spotify or Apple Podcast show notes, and then they can find it from there. In the meantime, good luck with your business.